expect to see what they saw. And when they saw it, they could never forget it. Ferdinand Hayden was hired to lead a team into the Northwest Territories. The 32 men headed west. They weren't here to protect Yellowstone. They were here to tear it to shreds in the name of progress. Gold interests, railroad barons, Congress. Powerful people wanted this land for themselves. But something happened during their 3-month journey. And slowly but surely, their mission changed. So as we celebrate the 150th anniversary of Yellowstone National Park, we take a look back in time at the events that led to the preservation of this magical place. Sometimes I think about the things I'm going to miss most when I finally have to walk away. Not just my family that I'll think of, but it'll be the books I never read, the music I never hear, and sometimes the stories that I wished I would have known. Most of us walk through life, and myself, admittedly, I do the same thing without really getting below the surface. When I was younger, I saw pictures of Yellowstone, and I thought, could there be a place like this in the world? Where these rivers cut through these mountains that were so high, and the animals, you could see them by the thousands. I remember when I got my first glimpse of the mountains, I had to take a breath. I began to understand what was so special about it. And when I read what it took for Yellowstone to be here so that we could all enjoy it, I realized that this was a story that I suddenly wanted to share. I think everyone in their life at some point thinks, I want to change the world. But it's rare to actually come across a true story of people who did. This was a time in America where all people cared about was what they could extract from the land, what they could get out of it. But these pioneers, they came up with an entirely new idea, a new way of finding value in the land. I want to see what they saw. I want to see what changed them. was the 150th anniversary of Yellowstone National Park. First thing I thought was, how does a park have an anniversary? What actually happened here 150 years ago? So I started to look into it. It's just an amazing story. Back in the early 1870s, all this land you see around here has been claimed up by miners. The stories about this place started making their way back east. Eventually, Congress got wind of it. You guys ready? Congress commissioned Ferdinand Hayden to go investigate Yellowstone. He recruited some of the best geologists, cartographers, and zoologists in the world. He also brought along a photographer and a painter to document their findings. The 32 men headed west. Their mission was twofold: to search for mineral exploits that could benefit the American people, and to find a path to build a railroad that would connect the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean. They weren't here to protect Yellowstone. They were here to tear it to shreds in the name of progress. But something happened during that 3-month journey. This place, it did something to them. Got inside them. And slowly but surely started to change their minds. And that's why it's still here. Yeah. She's still here. The Hayden expedition resulted in the creation of the National Park System, Yellowstone being the first. Now there are over 4,000 worldwide and over 2 million square miles of pristine nature that are protected from destruction. Those are some big boots to fill. But I'm walking in the shadow of the pioneers, following the trail they blazed, as detailed in 2 journals kept by members of the expedition and 10 letters that Hayden himself wrote. Does Yellowstone look the same today as they described in these journals 150 years ago? Let's find out. The explorers' first look at Yellowstone was on the morning of July 16th, collecting fossils on one of the mountain peaks of the Gallatin Range. They looked south and saw the Yellowstone River winding through its valley in the distance. They knew they'd arrived. Fed by runoff from the snowy mountain peaks, the Yellowstone River is the lifeblood of the park. Nearly 700 miles from end to end, it's the longest free-flowing river in America. No dams have ever been built on it, leaving the Yellowstone every bit as wild and untamed as it was when Hayden first saw it. The Yellowstone moves east and south through this part of the park before branching off into a 40-mile-long tributary called the Lamar River. This leads straight to the fertile valley that is the mecca of Northern American wildlife. Lamar Valley is often referred to as the American Serengeti. The abundant tall grasses and endless supply of fresh water is everything the prey species in the area could ask for. And as they flood into a 1-mile wide and 20-mile long wildlife corridor, they're followed by predators of all shapes and sizes. The wildlife in Lamar Valley seemed to have an impact on the Hayden expedition. On one hand, the journal entries still refer to the viability of mining the area. But on the other hand, they wrote about the abundance of elk and deer and more frequent run-ins with Yellowstone's alpha predator, the grizzly bear. Over 700 live within the park's borders today. It's a healthy population, and it takes 22,000 pounds of meat each day to keep them all fed. These elk aren't volunteering for the job, but this hungry bear doesn't care. The herd has the advantage of speed, and the bear can't keep up his chase for very long. But in the chaos, a calf gets separated from the herd. The calf opts to hide. And the grizzly searches. If she moves, she'll be an easy meal for the grizzly.
she wins this round of hide and seek. Mom calls out to find her offspring. This is life in the Lamar Valley. Hayden and his men weren't here for wildlife watching, so they had to move on, pushing further into the unknown.
Sometimes I think about the spirit of the great explorers, you know, what it takes to be the first to do something, to journey into the unknown. I mean, these guys had a job to do, and that was to keep going. But as they headed south, they started to hear a roar in the distance. Imagine making your camp right here, having no idea what would be waiting for you come sunrise. You know, when you follow a river for long enough, you're bound to run into a waterfall. The one that the Hayden party found on their way was a monster. 308 feet tall, over 60,000 gallons of water fall over its lower falls every second. You know, the sheer sight and sound of the cascading water was almost too perfect for the lead geologist to put into words. Standing there, I thought how utterly impossible it would be to describe to another the sensations inspired by such a presence. A grander scene was never witnessed by mortal eyes. Now, how in the hell are we going to get down that?
The morning of July 27th, Albert Peel wrote in his journal, "This morning, Elliot and I started for the falls with the intention of descending to the bottom of the canyon. A thing which all hunters and trappers say cannot be done. The men were given a warning, but they did not heed it. They didn't have fancy climbing gear, no harnesses, no carabiners, just ropes made of elk hide that were known for snapping when they got wet. That and the insatiable desire to explore. So they tied the ropes around their shoulders, crossed their fingers, and made the 308-foot descent in just over 2 hours. When they finally reached the canyon below, Peel wrote, All was silent except the roaring of the water as its waves dashed upon the rock at our feet. Far above us, the trees along the edge seemed like a line of grass. They had arrived in the canyon. And what a magnificent canyon it is. Carved by the river for the last 160,000 years, the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone is a work in progress. Today, it's 24 miles long, 1,200 feet in depth, and 4,000 feet wide. Tomorrow, it'll be a little bigger. Every day, it gets deeper and wider as hydrothermal activity weakens the rock that lines it. That rock is rich in iron deposits, which oxidize over time, giving the canyon the stunning yellow colors that swirl inside its walls. The Minotari tribe named the river Miseadazi, which means Yellow Rock River. When trappers and fur traders came, they interpreted that as Yellowstone. Renowned American painter Thomas Moran was part of the Hayden expedition. His job was to capture the sights they witnessed. When Hayden sent Moran's renderings of the falls and the canyon back east to Congress, they were speechless. These golden canyon walls give the park her name, and that painting hung in the U.S. Capitol for 80 years. At the edge of the canyon, the hills rise up and drop back off into a sprawling basin. Everything you see here was once underwater, trapped for centuries beneath the floodwaters of the melting Ice Age glaciers. When the water finally drained, it left behind 50 square miles of subalpine grasslands that would come to be named after the pioneers. This is Hayden Valley. A stunning open range to behold and home to one of the most iconic animals in U.S. history, the great American bison. Weighing up to a ton and standing 6 feet tall at the hump, these are the largest mammals in North America. And the Yellowstone herd are the only pure descendants left of the Asian bison who migrated across the land bridge to North America 400,000 years ago. And in July and August, right when the Hayden party was making their way down these hills, dust fills the air in the valley. The bison run is underway. Female bison tend to mate with the most dominant bulls. This wallowing behavior by the males is a display of power and aggression. During the mating season, each bull will lose around 200 pounds, dedicating all his time and energy to performing for the potential mates. It's an interesting ritual, but highly effective. Because in Yellowstone, the bison are thriving. And every year, more and more of these woolly giants roam the valley. Fortunately, Mother Nature has her own way of balancing the ecosystem. And while the bison here are formidable, in Hayden Valley, the Wapiti Lake Wolf Pack runs the show. And bison steak is on their menu. At 19 wolves strong, the pack is, of course, to be reckoned with. And they fought off numerous attempts from other packs to steal their territory. With a flourishing population of over 500 wolves currently living in the Yellowstone ecosystem, it's certain that they'll be challenged again, and a new pack will reign supreme over the valley. It's all part of the natural and inevitable ebb and flow of life.
I mean, these guys, by the time they got here, they must have known they found paradise. How could you not, you know? Wild game everywhere, geology everywhere. Maybe it was right here where they started to change their mind about this place. Why in the hell would you build a railroad through all of this? During the expedition, Hayden was sending letters back to the North Pacific Railroad Company, just giving them updates, but at some point his tone changed and his communications became less about logistics and more about the beauty all around. Maybe it was a day just like this, right here in this spot that got to him.
whether the seeds of doubt had crept into their minds or not. Hayden and his team were determined to explore as much of this alien world as possible. So they headed in further, following the river to the lake that feeds it. Miles across and 14 miles wide, Yellowstone Lake is the largest high-elevation lake in America. Its 110 miles of coastline provide unlimited fresh drinking water to every species in the park during the summer. In winter, the liquid water is trapped below a sheet of ice, 3 feet thick. Holes in the frozen surface mark spots where warm water gushes up from below as geysers, and hot springs rage beneath the lake's peaceful surface. It's the result of Yellowstone's active geology. It's what gives life to all the park's geothermal activity. It's why this alien world looks like no other place on Earth. And the curiosities it offers are endless. Black Dragon's Cauldron, a boiling mud pot that burst through the ground in 1948, once blasting mud up to 20 feet in the air. The cauldron has since cooled to a steady bubble along the surface. Mammoth Hot Springs, formed over thousands of years as spring water traveled underground through a fault line and then cooled as it seeped out of the limestone, depositing calcium carbonate. Algae in the warm pools turned the stone shells in the travertine terrace red, green, brown, and orange. The Grand Prismatic Spring is a single feature that took up the most space in the Hayden Expedition's journals. A mesmerizing sight where water bubbles up from the Earth's crust. At 189 degrees in the center, it's too hot for anything to live, giving it the deep blue color of pure water. As the water spreads across the surface, it cools. Allowing thermophilic bacteria to flourish. Each ring of color is a different type of bacteria that thrives at a different temperature. But bacteria aren't the only life forms that have adapted to the unique geology here. Bison migrate to the thermals in winter, where heat melts away the heavy snow, exposing the grass below. Cliff swallows come every spring to make condos out of the pocked sandstone mounds left behind by the dormant hot springs of the past. The ever-morphing geology of Yellowstone built these homes. All they have to do is move in. Must be nice.
You know, it's amazing how much they all knew so long ago. Must have all felt the ground moving, heard the rock slides in the distance at night falling. They all knew something was pushing from down below. It took another 100 years to figure out what was really going on down there. Kind of wish I didn't sometimes.
We know there's a volcano down there and a magma chamber 37 miles long, 18 miles wide, and extending 5 miles down into the Earth's crust. Scientists estimate an eruption could send thousands of cubic miles of rock and molten glass into the atmosphere. Creating a cloud of dust and debris so thick that no one on Earth would see the sun for years. That worst-case scenario isn't meant to be terrifying. It's meant to quantify the power of the underground boiler that sits right below the surface of Yellowstone. That volcano's only erupted 3 times over the last 2 million years, so it's unpredictable. But the awesome heat it generates powers one of the most iconic landmarks in the U.S. One you can set your watch by. People come from all over the world to stand with eyes wide and mouths hung open. It's the most visited feature in Yellowstone. This is Old Faithful. Named for the consistency of its eruptions, Old Faithful is a crack in the earth above an underground reservoir. And Yellowstone's searing geothermal heat keeps that water steaming hot 24 hours a day, filling the chamber with steam pressure, pressure that builds and builds, and roughly every 90 minutes. After months of exploring, the Hayden team had seen some of the most dazzling sights in the world. And their journals were filled with attempts to detail the mind-blowing phenomena that lay right in their country's backyard. They knew immediately this was a special place. But then they came across 2 prospectors who'd laid claim to the entire area. They were gonna dig for gold, build a hotel, and market the water as some sort of magical healing potion. And the thought of it must have just crushed Hayden. He knew that it would be destroyed soon, that his children's children would never see it unless he did something about it. It requires no stretch of the imagination to see this place in the near future, thronged with invalids drinking this water and bathing in it for their health.
knew that if he could protect Yellowstone, if he could find a way, that it would rank with any natural curiosity the world can produce. His words. Imagine the pressure Hayden must have been feeling. Gold interests, Congress, railroad barons, powerful people wanted this land for themselves. He knew the fight would be uphill, but he also knew that when you have an idea and you believe in it strongly enough, you can change the world. They didn't expect to see what they saw. And when they saw it, they could never forget it. Ferdinand Hayden was hired to lead a team into the Northwest Territories. The 32 men headed west. They weren't here to protect Yellowstone. They were here to tear it to shreds in the name of progress. Gold interests, railroad barons, Congress. Powerful people wanted this land for themselves. But something happened during their 3-month journey. And slowly but surely, their mission changed. So as we celebrate the 150th anniversary of Yellowstone National Park, we take a look back in time at the events that led to the preservation of this magical place. What's the day? April 25th, 26th? Most of the country's thawing out, celebrating the arrival of spring, but not here, man. This is Yellowstone, 8 months a year. You know, the crazy thing is that 98% of the people who come to visit will never see it like this. If you ask me, this is the way to do it. It's perfect. It's just perfect. Ferdinand Hayden tried to survey this area in 1862. Planned it perfectly, you know, he came out in the summer, But then a huge storm in late June made the mountains impassable. Took him 9 more years to make it back here. It's a good thing he did.
Yellowstone in the winter is a thing of beauty. On an average year, 150 inches of snow will fall. And at higher elevations, it's often twice that. More than 6 months a year, it looks like this. Even the summer months aren't safe from the occasional snowfall. In one of Yellowstone's most spectacular winter sights, diamond dust floats through the air like a cloud of tiny mirrors. It gets so cold here that water vapor crystallizes. It is both beautiful and cruel. Some will endure its challenges, while others seek out safe havens in lower elevations. Some will burrow in dens and wait out the season. While others thrive in a wild that is turned in their favor. But one thing is certain. In Yellowstone, winter cannot be ignored. The American bison is the largest land mammal in North America. They've lived in Yellowstone continuously since prehistoric times. You ever look at a bison and wonder why they have those massive humps? It's a perfectly evolved adaptation to deal with the snow. Most ungulates forage for grass by breaking up the snow with their hooves. That won't work here in Yellowstone. The snow's too heavy, too deep. So the bison evolved massive neck muscles that power their enormous heads side to side like a snowplow, exposing the grass underneath. The temperature here can get as low as -60 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's good to pack a heavy coat. The bison's is so heavy that their body heat doesn't even melt the snow that collects on their fur. Their skin thickens in winter, and fatty deposits keep them warm from the inside. But even the perfectly adapted bison have to fight to survive every winter. If it snows too much, they can't access the grass they need to fuel their massive bodies. expedition first came to Yellowstone, they took note not only of the largest herd that roamed the valleys, but also the large number of dead bison that fed the park's predators. They're left over after the unrelenting winter culls the herd. The harsh conditions kill 1 out of 10 bison every year. This has become known simply as winter kill. It provides predators in the park with as much as 800,000 pounds of meat each winter. Everyone wants a piece of the action. Because the window of opportunity is small. The next snowstorm is usually just hours away, and anything left uneaten will be buried until spring. Hoping to avoid that fate, these bison endure a long migration to lower elevations, where superheated water beneath the surface melts the snow above. There they will find the grass they need to survive until spring. Every living thing in Yellowstone spends at least half the year battling the harsh conditions. It was something the pioneers on the Hayden expedition wanted to avoid dealing with, making their journey in the summer. But they quickly found out that even the best laid plans can be undone quickly here. And so did I.
You know, sometimes I find myself wondering whose brilliant idea was this. Usually when that happens, I'm the culprit. But man, Yellowstone in the snow and cold, it's no country for the faint of heart. I mean, the animals have had millions of years to adapt to the conditions, and even still there's plenty that don't make it. Being here makes me think about George Allen. One of the 2 journals to survive through time was Allen's. He was a geologist and Hayden's mentor. He was one of the older gentlemen on the expedition. And sometime in late July in 1871, another big storm blew through and it buried everything. And Allen was in his tent shivering, kind of the same way as I am right now. And he wrote about how miserable he was. Wasn't sure he'd survive the expedition. He left the next day. That's probably a good decision. Probably a really good decision.
Yellowstone National Park is an easy place to visit, but living here, that's anything but easy. Every species that has managed to survive the winters has only done so through adaptation. These river otters are perfectly adapted to the conditions. They Thick hair protects warm skin from cold water. That's why their pelts were so sought after by the hunters and trappers who made their way to the Yellowstone region long before Hayden and his men. The otter furs were in high demand by the wealthiest people back east because of the warmth they provided and the luster of the fur. Today, the otters in Yellowstone don't have to worry about trappers. Their battle is keeping themselves fed during the cold winter months. The steady supply of fish in open water can only be counted on in the warmer months. The winter freeze chokes off the river, cutting off the food supply for the mother and her 2 pups. They go from one hole in the ice to another in search of a meal. But with every fish they pull from the icy depths, the supply is lessened. And soon this family will need to find a new place to fish. River otters may reign supreme in water, but on land it's a different story altogether. Here they go from hunter to hunted. Alternating between hopping and sliding, they can reach speeds of 15 miles per hour through the heavy snow. They'll need that speed as they search for a new fishing hole. And predators are abound. While the otter family struggles against the cold and snow, wolves thrive. In these conditions, they're top dog. But winter brings territorial disputes, and at times, unbridled savagery. This is when strong packs expand, and weak packs die off. The Druid pack once reigned supreme in this area, only to wither in recent years, as Molly's pack has taken the throne. But with success comes problems, and Molly's pack already finds itself in turmoil. Rival packs are constantly on the lookout for new territory. Recently, a pack of 15 wolves traveled 40 miles outside of their territory to take on another pack. Securing territory is key to their survival. More land means more hunting grounds. In winter, elk is the main thing on the menu for this pack. % of their diet is elk during this cold period. An elk cow has been separated from the harem. And even with strength and numbers, fighting off a wolf pack is a hero's task. The wolves move on to high ground, and when the sun goes down, they will strike. When they do, they'll announce it to the world. The wolves' ability to hunt out doesn't just keep them well fed, it keeps the park in balance. By thinning out oversized elk populations and cutting down the weak and sick among them, they leave stronger, more resilient elk herds behind. The elk cow has made a good meal, but it's not enough. It's never enough. These wolves need more calories in the winter. Moving through heavy snow and maintaining body heat requires more energy. So they're on the prowl for more, and always will be. Like I said, it's an easy place to visit, tough place to live. This male bobcat is another creature that will fight to survive all winter long. Every meal will be a battle. A duck. Now that's good eating. It could keep him fed for several days. He typically prowls the conifer forests of Yellowstone. But desperate times call for desperate measures, and he comes into the open today. His small feet and short legs aren't built for the loose snow. And despite his appetite, he's hesitant to get into the cold water. Though the bobcat is a skilled hunter, this isn't a fair fight. He's out of his element. Finding meals will only get harder as winter continues, and fat stores and energy reserves dwindle. And if the bobcat is going to feed, all he can do is bide his time and wait for the right opportunity. As lovely as the sight is, as lucid and clean the fallen snow, I can't help but think of the chaos that winter brings with it.
Ever been to a bonfire? You notice how when you first show up, people are all spread out. Maybe there's a few around the fire, but you got some people over here and you got another group over there. Then it gets late and night grows cold. Eventually, every last person is huddled around that fire. That down there, that's a bonfire. When it gets warmer, the animals spread out and make their way up the ranges all the way to the peaks. Then when the snow comes, they head back down to the valley seeking refuge. Creatures that have absolutely no interest in being friends huddle around that fire. When it gets 30, 40 degrees below zero, that fire dims and they huddle even closer. That's when all hell breaks loose. Herds that graze the valleys in spring and summer have broken into smaller groups as they migrate toward the lower elevations. And no one is more aware of this than the wolves who track these smaller herds as they migrate towards the bonfire.
These bison have traveled 40 miles to reach the geyser basin. For a migration that began weeks ago, the steam from the thermal vents is a welcome sight. But the warmth of the thermals draws in predator and prey. The bison herd arrives at the geyser basin. The supervolcano beneath the Earth's surface fights against the cold above, sending steam outward, melting the snow and exposing the grass. But there is a downside to grazing here. The grass that grows near the thermal has less nutrients. And the long journey to get here took a lot out of the bison. By the time they arrive, they're at their weakest. And wolves are opportunists. They've traveled across the park to greet the bison at the bonfire, just like they do every winter. Taking on a herd of healthy bison at full strength isn't worth the effort. But in their tired, weakened state, the wolves will come. With the sun setting, the attack is imminent. Under the cover of darkness, they strike. And by the time the sun rises, the wolves are finishing their meal. They'll eat as much as 20 pounds of meat each on a kill like this. With their bellies full, the wolves will leave the bison herd alone today. Tonight will be a different story. Back at the riverbank, the starving bobcat continues his fight for survival. He needs a meal, and soon. A muskrat may not taste as good as a duck, but it'll have to do. The semi-aquatic muskrat builds his burrow on the riverbank. Little does he know, he's being hunted. The bobcat was reluctant to jump into the freezing water to catch the duck. But he's one day hungrier, one day more desperate. Another meal has slipped away. It's going to be a long winter for the bobcat. If his luck doesn't change soon, it may be a short one. At the higher elevations, Yellowstone's bighorn sheep fight their own battle every winter. The bighorn sheep in Yellowstone descend from sheep that left Siberia and migrated across the Bering Land Bridge 750,000 years ago. They became the primary source of food for the indigenous Tukadika tribe, who lived in Yellowstone thousands of years before Hayden ever set foot there. Tukadika is roughly translated to eaters of the mountain sheep. And the tribes lived at high elevations where the bighorn was plentiful. They used the sheep not only for food, but by warming their horns in Yellowstone's thermal waters, they could shape them into extremely durable bows. There used to be millions of bighorns spread across the western United States. Today, there are fewer than 70,000. And each winter, Yellowstone's bighorn decide who gets to mate this year and who doesn't. Through a series of battles, the toughest males established dominance. Only they will have breeding rights. A fully grown ram can weigh 300 pounds, 40 of which are held in their horns. Their skulls have 2 layers of cushion above the brain, which absorb the impact of the collision. The sounds of winter are almost as incredible as the sights. Almost as incredible. There's something majestic about the snow-covered peaks. Something inspiring about seeing the wild world unchanged by the hands of man, unchanged by the hands of time.
I don't think I'm any different than anyone else. We all grow up in different places. I grew up in the inner city. I was born in a place called Compton, California. But I remember when I got my first glimpse of the Rocky Mountains. You know, it was like the scales came off my eyes, and I thought, could there be a place like this in the world? The reality is that America's so big, and Yellowstone reminds you of what the country might have looked like before there was any outsiders that ever came. And to know that the rivers still flow and these mountains still stand, there is something that we should be thankful for, the human will to convince other people that this is worth keeping. It wasn't a battle, and it was uphill, but it was about one man who believed. He had an idea about himself, so much so that he knew, if given the chance, he could change the world.
Ferdinand Hayden's determination to convince the U.S. Congress to protect Yellowstone rather than let it be torn apart is the reason we can tell these stories today. It's the reason that the bobcats and bison and wolves have this pristine landscape to roam, to breed, to fight, and to survive. Survival is the name of the game in winter. The river otters continue their desperate trek to find a new food source. They've made their way to a place where the water never freezes. The upper falls. Water crashing from the falls churns the pool below, preventing it from freezing. But the fishing hole is 109 feet down. In the summer of 1871, Hayden and his men used ropes to traverse the falls as they explored Yellowstone. Believe it or not, these otters don't have any ropes. But the snow creates another opportunity. Mom teaches the pups the art of sledding. The otter family makes it to their new fishing hole. They're back in their element, and soon they'll dine. They found a workaround for the winter conditions, and food here will be abundant. The bobcat isn't so lucky. The pangs of hunger are overwhelming, and he is in desperate search of food. At this point, he'll settle for anything. It's all or nothing. The time to strike is now. Finally, the bobcat has his dinner. his chances of surviving the winter just got a little better. Yellowstone in winter is iconic. A world of ice and fire. A world where every creature fights their own battle every single day. But if not for the pioneers who made the decision to protect this place 150 years ago, we'd never know that it even existed.
You know, I don't know if there's another place on Earth that gives you the evocative spectacle of nature that Yellowstone does in the snow. And being here, seeing it firsthand makes me wonder what if. What if Hayden and his team never came here? What if they'd been delayed a year and people had set up gold mines? What if their plan to protect this place didn't work? And the truth was, it almost didn't. There was a cartographer named Anton Schonberg who was part of the expedition, and it was a big part of Hayden's plan. He took all the notes they were going to use to create the maps that they were going to present to Congress, and those maps were going to be crucial in getting Yellowstone protected. Then just days before he was going to meet Hayden in Washington, D.C., he killed himself. Turns out that 6 days earlier, the Great Chicago Fire had destroyed a huge amount of the data collected on the expedition. It was tragic, of course, but it was a disaster for Hayden, and he needed to act fast.
Hayden knew that a watershed moment was upon him. He knew that the wolves were at the gates and the snow was the only thing keeping them out. For when spring arrived, the destruction of Yellowstone would begin in force. The vandals who are waiting to enter this wonderland will in a single season be spoiled beyond recovery these remarkable curiosities, which have required all the cunning skill of nature thousands of years to prepare. With that said, Hayden cast the first stone to protect the land that he'd grown to love.
You know, Hayden predicted they would come in droves to destroy this place once the winter released the land from its clutches. His words, not mine, but boy, was he right. Spring finally came in 1872, and one after another, the profiteers started filing their claims, 100, 150, 200 acres at a time. The claims poured into the public land office. Everything from gold to silver to medicinal spring water, every damn thing we've seen had a claim filed on it. And the miracle of it all was that every single claim that was filed that year, every single one was denied. Because you see, 8 days earlier, President Ulysses S. Grant signed Hayden's bill into law. The national park system was created just in the nick of time, and Yellowstone was saved by 8 days. You know, that's not a fairy tale. It's not a Hollywood ending. It's just how close it all was to going. no one alive today would even know this land even existed. Thank God for that snow, huh? Let's go back. You know, the origin story of Yellowstone National Park really is the ultimate battle between David and Goliath. The regular guy against the impossibly huge behemoth that is the United States government. Ferdinand Hayden spearheaded the whole thing. The truth was, he'd been fighting against the odds his whole life. He grew up destitute. His dad was an alcoholic who died when Hayden was 10, and his mother abandoned him. He went to work on his uncle's farm, and when he turned 18, he packed a few things he had and walked. Actually walked 300 miles to Oberlin College in Ohio. Imagine that. He just walked to a college, went to the president's office and said, "Hey, I don't have any money, but if you enroll me, I intend to change the world for the better." And they did. And he did too. They didn't expect to see what they saw. And when they saw it, they could never forget it. Ferdinand Hayden was hired to lead a team into the Northwest Territories. The 32 men headed west. They weren't here to protect Yellowstone. They were here to tear it to shreds in the name of progress. Gold interests, railroad barons, Congress. Powerful people wanted this land for themselves. But something happened during their 3-month journey. And slowly but surely, their mission changed. So as we celebrate the 150th anniversary of Yellowstone National Park, we take a look back in time at the events that led to the preservation of this magical place. After nearly 6 months under the crushing grip of winter in Yellowstone, the brutal conditions ease up. Temperatures rise, and it's finally time for Yellowstone's wildlife to take center stage again. Some are returning from long journeys away from the park. Some have been taking refuge for the winter, and some are seeing spring for the very first time. This is an entirely new Yellowstone, transformed and filled with vibrant, burgeoning life in every corner. Even the Hayden expedition, hard at work surveying the land, took note as the newest members of each species were put on display. little nicer than when we were here last time, huh? Yeah. Spring is definitely on its way. All that snow up there, that's lifeblood of Yellowstone. You see a lot of it's already melted off. You know, the runoff here feeds the park with over 60,000 gallons of fresh water every second. It's like the alarm clock that wakes up all of Yellowstone. Signals the coming seasons. Maybe life's going to get a little easier here for a while. All the animals come out to play. This whole place gets reborn now.
As the days get longer and warmer, snow and ice melt into life-giving water that soaks the ground and trickles into Yellowstone Lake. The water refreshes the lake, and the sudden overflow drains through the Yellowstone River at roughly 20,000 cubic feet per second. The longest undammed river in North America, the Yellowstone is wild and untamed. Nothing can stop it from doing what it wants to do. And as it drops in elevation, it only grows stronger, and the power of its force goes on full display. The lower falls feed the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone, where rushing water has plowed through the earth for 160,000 years, leaving behind a ravine 4,000 feet across, 1,200 feet deep, and 24 miles long. It's a testament to the river's power and the vastness of time. But sometimes the river shows off its strength in much more destructive ways. In 2022, higher than expected rains in the spring combined with the melting snow to create an unprecedented series of floods that overtook the park. The river spilled over their banks to never-before-seen heights, causing some of the roads and bridges to be washed away, and affected all of Yellowstone's residents.
Things were changing in a matter of minutes.
It's left us totally separate from the outside world.
It's utter devastation.
The park had to evacuate over 10,000 visitors as entire sections became submerged in water. The damage to the man-made structures in the park and gateway communities will take years to replace. But even though this was a once every 1,000 years flood, the ecosystem will fix itself. Flooding is just a part of the cycle of Yellowstone's life. Balance will be restored without any help from mankind. Destruction is actually needed for the park to maintain balance. Sometimes it's in the form of water, sometimes it's fire. When the Hayden expedition first approached Yellowstone 150 years ago, they took note of multiple forest fires in the distance. They'd arrived at the beginning of fire season, which runs from July to late September. Hayden and his men were laying eyes on something that affected Yellowstone repeatedly, ever since the last great glacial retreat 14,000 years ago. Put simply, Yellowstone had burned before. and it would burn again.
In the American West, fires continue to crackle through thousands of acres of brush and timberland.
In 1988, Yellowstone faced its largest fire on record.
Firefighters say they are battling the worst fire conditions they've ever seen in Yellowstone National Park.
A perfect storm developed when several smaller fires merged into a single raging inferno that scorched nearly 800,000 acres of parkland, more than a third of Yellowstone.
Firefighters are hosing down roofs at Mammoth Hot Springs, the Yellowstone Park's headquarters, directly in the path of the fires.
It led to America's largest firefighting effort at the time, costing $120 million.
Army soldiers are being sent to the front lines to battle a very stubborn enemy, forest fires.
But despite the money and the manpower, it was Mother Nature that did what it always does. Restoring order through massive rain and snowstorms, fire is actually a necessary part of Yellowstone's balance. High above, the cones of lodgepole pine trees require the extreme heat of forest fires to open. They then release their seeds over newly charred areas. And replant the forest. The burn scars from 1988's fire will take several more decades to fully disappear. But one thing is certain. The forest, just like everything else in the park, will be reborn. The animals in Yellowstone also go through periods of transition. Each year in the spring, many of them begin their migration from winter grounds back to their spring and summer homes. As many as 20,000 elk begin an epic migration to the higher plateaus of the park. There, they'll be met by fresh green grass that will keep them fed for the next 6 months. But as the waters dash downhill, and thousands of bison embark on a journey uphill, it's only a matter of time before there's a conflict. This bison herd has been on the move for several days. This calf was born in April, and she's about to face her first big test. She finds herself on the banks of the raging Yellowstone River, cutting clear across her path. The entire herd must cross it to get to greener pastures. Bison are the largest mammal in North America. But even the adults struggle against the power of the spring runoff. For the young, it's trial by fire. Or in this case, water. calf is especially susceptible to the rushing current. Mom thinks fast, using her massive body to break up the current. Other members of the herd are less lucky. And a fully grown cow is taken under. The calf survives her first test in Yellowstone. There will be another test tomorrow. In spring, all of Yellowstone's animals are on the move as they spread across the park's 2.2 million acres. But the rocky mountainous terrain makes traveling a slow and treacherous process. The bald eagle doesn't have to worry about the terrain. Gliding effortlessly over the massive canyons, building nests atop the mighty forest of ferns and cypress trees, and resting comfortably near the top of Yellowstone's food chain. Every inch of the park is their kingdom. Bad news for the ground squirrels that dot the valley. But the bald eagles aren't the only guns in town. Yellowstone is also home to an ever-growing population of golden eagles. With a young hatchling in her nest, this female golden eagle will be hunting for two this spring, which means the bald eagle will face stiff competition. Dive speeds of 150 miles per hour, there's no land animal on Earth that can outrun the golden eagle. And she swoops in for the kill. But the bald eagle won't give up his meal so easily. This chase is costing the bald eagle valuable calories that he could be using to hunt other prey. So he relents. And the golden eagle brings the kill back to the nest. While many species rely on seasonal migration to escape the effects of winter, some endure the months of brutal cold by hunkering down into states of suspended slumber. The boreal chorus frogs freeze into balls of ice. Their hearts stop beating, and they shut down their lungs. But when the spring thaw brings them back from the dead, their bass-filled guttural croon is the soundtrack of Yellowstone. Grizzly bears also emerge from their winter-long slumber. This adult male has been living off body fat for 5 months and hasn't had anything to eat or drink since entering his den for the winter. It's a misconception that grizzlies wake up from hibernation ravenous with hunger. While they do immediately begin searching for food, they're lethargic for the first 2 weeks. It's like a state of walking hibernation while they wait for their metabolism to restart. Fortunately for this bear, he doesn't have to hunt for a meal today. This elk carcass is what's known as winter kill, the end result of the incredibly harsh winter. The meat stays fresh, preserved by the snow. As the snow retreats, the easy feast are first come, first served. The bear eats his fill, but he's not alone. The scent of the decaying flesh has attracted a lone wolf. He'll wait for the grizzly to fill up. When the wolf is done, a pack of coyotes will enjoy the leftovers. And later birds will pick the bones clean. One dead elk taken by the winter has given life to several. Thanks to Ferdinand Hayden and his men, the food chain is still perfectly intact, just like it was 150 years ago when they fought to protect Yellowstone. Many of the sights they saw are the same ones we see today. But still, I wonder what it would have been like laying eyes on this land for the first time.
Sometimes I wish I could jump into a time machine and go back and join Hayden and his expedition just to see what they saw. Times like now when I'm starving, I'm just happy to follow the journals. But these guys, Congress sent them back here to figure out how to mine, how to exploit this land. So a lot of the men on the expedition were scientists, academics. They weren't necessarily burly mountain men. So after a long day of traversing, they still had to find something to eat. They didn't hunt, they didn't eat, and they weren't used to that. Judging by the journals, they spent a lot of time thinking about food. When they did get the occasional deer or elk or even a black bear, times were good. But other times, 32 men were sharing a couple of grouse. I'm sure it was times like that when they all questioned the monumental task that was in front of them. You know, it's a lot easier for David to defeat Goliath when David's well fed. Hot.
Much like the men on the Hayden expedition, every living thing in Yellowstone is in constant search for its next meal. As the park's newest arrivals enjoy their first spring, they grow bigger and require more food. This means learning new skills. These grizzly cubs were born in February. After 2 months of nursing and sleeping, it's time to leave the den so that their mother can teach them the ways of the world. They'll need meat to sustain their body weight. And that means learning how to hunt. It may look like they're playing because they are, but that's not all they're doing. It's called play fighting. And it's how the young cubs learn to use their teeth and claws. These young mountain lions do the same. Harmlessly chasing and pouncing on each other as they practice the art of survival in the wild. Wolves also play fight to keep their hunting skills sharp. Wolves are a native species in Yellowstone and were abundant when the Hayden expedition came through in 1871. But shortly after the park was established, they were hunted nearly to extinction. There were no wolves in the park for a century. But in 1995, they were reintroduced in Yellowstone. Their revival in the park exceeded conservationist expectations. Exploding elk populations were brought back to sustainable levels. In turn, plants that the elk fed on once again began to thrive, allowing eroding riverbeds to return to their true form. Some scientists believe that the wolves have helped rebalance the entire ecosystem. Now on Yellowstone's 150th anniversary, the springtime here looks and feels every bit as it did when Ferdinand Hayden and his team first arrived in the 1870s. As serene as the verdant valleys are, as playful the parade of youth may be, along with it comes a dangerous undercurrent. Spring is the first time when the newest member of each species learns the ways of the world. Yesterday, this bison calf learned a dangerous lesson about crossing the Yellowstone River. Unfortunately, she'll learn another today. While winter kill leaves plenty of easy meals for the wolves, eventually those run out. and bison calves are the next in line. The bison know exactly why the wolves are here. The wolves use a wide range of vocalizations to communicate their strategy. And that strategy is to cut off the bison's path. The bison can't escape. So the females form a tight circle around the young in the middle. And the males form the perimeter, circling the females. These bulls are not giving up their offspring without a fight. The bison have won the standoff today. There will be another tomorrow. The Hayden expedition was dazzled by the confluence of wolves and bison and grizzly bears. They wrote about it in their journals often. But there's another creature that they wrote about even more. One that emerges from hibernation each spring. This beast so terrified the pioneers that they had to find a defense against it or risk their entire mission. When the snow melts, it runs to the lower elevation and fuels the rivers and streams. But it also creates stagnant pools, giving mosquitoes the perfect opportunity to lay eggs. Their onslaught is a theme in their journal entries. One of the geologists even considered leaving to protect his sanity. That was all until they came across some ancient knowledge.
Here's a good one. Indigenous Americans have been burning bison dung for thousands of years. It's actually a great replacement for wood if you need to start a fire. For some reason, the mosquitoes they just hate it. So about halfway through the expedition, they started smudging. That's what they called it. And after that, no more journal entries about mosquitoes. You know, if there's something I like less than picking up bison patties, it's being eaten alive by mosquitoes. You know, the funny thing is, there's so many things that could have derailed Hayden and his men from finishing their mission out here. But it wasn't the wolves, wasn't the grizzlies, wasn't even the U.S. Congress that almost knocked him off course.
was the damn mosquitoes. Just don't throw the bison crap into the fire until after you've eaten. Hayden and his men found a cure for the scourge of biting insects. But one man's wildly annoying pest is the main attraction for some of Yellowstone's more colorful visitors. Over 150 species of birds migrate to Yellowstone each spring to feast on the ample insects. For many of these birds, where there's mosquitoes, there's a full belly. But that's not all. The abundance of insects lure fish to the surface of lakes and rivers. Those fish are a handsome catch for Yellowstone's birds of prey, including the mighty osprey. When these raptors hunt, it's a sight to behold. They use their excellent vision to spot fish in the river below and dive talons first to latch onto their meal. The birds, the insects, the fish, the trees, even the rivers, they're all part of the cycle of life in a land that is reborn each spring. It's an incredible time to see Yellowstone National Park, so full of life and color. The vibrance is exactly what Ferdinand Hayden and the men who joined him wanted to preserve. It's exactly what they were talking about when they pleaded with the U.S. Congress, promising that the American people would benefit more by just seeing this place than they would from any railroad or any gold pulled from the ground. He believed that Yellowstone would be a place where anyone could come and visit, come and be inspired by the sights and sounds. And he was right. There's something about staring out at the landscape here, taking in the natural world just as it was intended to be. Just gives you a little reset. Even if it only lasts a day or only an hour, it's priceless. You know, sometimes I think what I might say if I ever got a chance to talk to people who lived in the past. I think if I met Ferdinand Hayden, it'd probably be just 2 words. Thank you. They didn't expect to see what they saw. And when they saw it, they could
never forget it. Ferdinand Hayden was hired to lead a team into the Northwest Territories. And the 32 men headed west. They weren't here to protect Yellowstone. They were here to tear it to shreds in the name of progress. Gold interests, railroad barons, Congress. Powerful people wanted this land for themselves. But something happened during their 3-month journey. And slowly but surely, their mission changed. So as we celebrate the 150th anniversary of Yellowstone National Park, we take a look back in time at the events that led to the preservation of this magical place. You know, I was hoping to get a look at some wolves this morning.
Nothing yet?
No, you?
Some do.
Ah. Well, I better say something brilliant then, huh? You know, wolves or no wolves, it's still a pretty nice way to spend the morning. It's quiet. Gives you time to think.
Well,
You know, I spent a lot of time thinking about what Hayden and his men did here, what they experienced. But they actually weren't the first outsiders to lay eyes on Yellowstone. A man named John Coulter beat him by 65 years. Coulter grew up in Kentucky, which in the late 1700s was the western frontier of the U.S. So when Lewis and Clark needed a few good men for their western expedition, they went straight to Kentucky, knowing that that's where the most rugged of the rugged lived. It must have been the way Coulter looked, or the way he shook a hand, that inspired confidence. But they signed him on, and for the next 28 months, they explored the West together. You could fill a few volumes with the stories from that trip, but it was only a chapter for Coulter. When the expedition was over, the group headed back to St. Louis to debrief on everything they discovered. That's when a chance meeting changed history. A few days out from St. Louis, they ran into a group of fur traders who had a dilemma. They wanted to set up a fur trade with the Crow Nation. The Crows had already returned to their winter camps, territory where no outsiders had ever set foot. After more than 2 years in the wilderness, Coulter had a decision to make. A warm bed in St. Louis, or the cold unknown. Some creatures just aren't built for captivity. So Coulter asked Lewis and Clark for an early dismissal, unheard of. They said he'd been so crucial to the expedition's success that they had no choice but to set him free. America's first mountain man was released into the wild.
He spent the next 3 years canoeing the rivers and traversing the peaks. He made trade deals with the Crow and faced certain death when he came upon hundreds of Blackfeet warriors just outside Yellowstone's borders. After the trapper he was traveling with was dismembered right in front of him, Coulter was stripped naked and told to run. It was a chance for the young Blackfeet to prove their manhood by killing Coulter. So he ran. Feet caked in blood and lungs drowned in fluid, he managed to stay ahead of the warriors for 21 days. Ironically, the very animal whose spur he sought saved his life. He managed to elude the young Blackfeet by hiding inside a beaver dam. When he arrived at Fort Manuel days later, he told the incredible story, and a few others. He told tales of exploding geysers, bubbling mud pots, rainbow-colored pools. No one believed him. They said he'd lost his mind or called him a drunk. It became a joke, as people sardonically labeled this place Coulter's Hell. Coulter never got the last laugh. He died 5 years later, long before the rest of the country would come to know the Yellowstone region was very much a real place.
I guess the last laugh was Coulter's, getting to see Yellowstone with his own eyes. At least I hope so. Okay, here we go. This is gonna get good.
The people who question what John Coulter saw may have referred to it as Coulter's Hell. But in reality, it was sacred ground. According to their oral history, the Kiowa people didn't have a homeland when the earth first was created. Instead, they had to earn one. Their God told them to travel to a harsh, unforgiving land where water boils out of a thundering cave. And if anyone was brave enough to jump into the water, the land would be theirs. One young man did. And when he climbed back out, the land around them had turned lush and beautiful. The Kiowa called the hot spring Tosaldo. Today it's known as Dragon's Mouth. Hidden deep inside its cave, gas and steam form pressure bubbles that explode against the cave's roof. When they pop, the sound echoes out like the growl of a beast. Steam drifting upwards like the hot breath of a dragon. Dragon's Mouth and other remarkable sights and sounds of Yellowstone had been experienced only by indigenous tribes, until John Coulter arrived in the area, the first outsider to see them. Soon others would follow. America was growing in the 1800s. Westward expansion was on the march. Gold strikes sent people past the Mississippi River into uncharted territory where there was plenty of land. But not enough railroads. So in 1853, Congress passed the Pacific Railroad Survey Bill. They wanted to chart the West and find potential railroad routes from the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean. The best and brightest scientific minds jumped onto the project. One of them was a geologist named Ferdinand Hayden, who in 1871 set his sights on the Yellowstone region. No one had mapped the area he had heard so many seemingly tall tales about. Hayden wanted to be the first to do it. He assembled a 32-man dream team made up of geologists, mineralogists, botanists, and zoologists. He also brought along a photographer and a painter to memorialize their findings. It took 27 horses, 21 mules, and 5 wagons to transport Hayden, the 31 men who joined him, and their gear across the country. Two journals that were kept during the trip and 10 letters sent by Hayden himself lasted through time, providing us with vivid insight into the team's historic journey. They traveled for days through jagged canyons and lush valleys. And on July 21st, 1871, they finally entered Yellowstone itself. And soon after, they arrived at the spot that immediately let them know Coulter's hell was very real. A giant complex of hot springs on a mountain of travertine. Mammoth Hot Springs was created over thousands of years. From cooling water spouted from below. Over 2 tons of calcium carbonate flows into Mammoth daily. and its terrace mountain is the largest of its kind on Earth. The photographers on the expedition had a field day here. And still today, it's one of the most photographed places in all of Yellowstone. Hayden's men camped nearby and studied the feature for 2 days. They met 2 squatters who had big plans to cash in on the unique geology. J.C. McCartney and H.R. Hoare had laid claim to 320 acres and established a ranch and bathhouse near Liberty Cap. They planned to market the water as having healing powers. Hayden knew they would destroy the area, but he didn't know how he would stop them. For that plan to solidify, they had to push deeper into the strange land, see what else it had to offer. They continued their march into the pristine valleys. Instantly, they were floored by the abundance of wildlife. Particularly the massive population of elk. The elk herds are a stunning sight for the tourist today. But to Hayden's men, they were a steady source of food. Long days of trekking over difficult terrain had the men thinking with their stomachs often, even when they encountered the park's most feared predators. Hunting is strictly prohibited in Yellowstone today, but it takes a lot of food to keep 32 hungry men motivated. And even grizzly bear was on their menu. The pioneers had to eat, and they had to sleep, making their camps at night in canvas tents, hoping for a good night's rest. But in the wilderness, sleeping isn't always easy.
Boy, am I glad I chose to set my tent right under a tree that houses the loudest owl in the continental United States. And always bring earplugs when you go camping. That's a tip I wish I'd remembered. You know, I was doing some reading before I got my 17 minutes of sleep. This is Albert Peel's journal. He was a mineralogist on expedition with Hayden. This morning, about 1 o'clock, we had quite an earthquake. The first shock lasted about 20 seconds and was followed by 5 or 6 shorter ones. Duncan, who was on guard, says that the trees were shaking
and that the horses that were lying down sprang to their feet. You know, I've been through my fair share of earthquakes, but one that lasts 20 seconds, that's a big one. Can't imagine anyone going back to sleep after that. That was the first recorded earthquake in Yellowstone. Now we know there are as many as 3,000 a year. Some small, some massive, like the one in 1951. It was so strong that a 25-mile-long section of the park was pushed up 40 feet in elevation in just a few seconds. At a magnitude of 7.3, it is Yellowstone's strongest earthquake, at least on record. Evidence of its destruction can still be seen today at Quake Lake. A 170-foot deep body of water that formed when a crumbling mountain tumbled into the nearby Madison River. Today, legions of ghost trees dot the lake. A stark reminder of how quickly the face of Yellowstone can change. Earthquakes, underground volcanoes, and entire mountains rising and falling. And here I am getting rattled by now. Despite the sleep deprivation, the team continued on their mission. And on July 25th, they reached another stunning sight, Tower Falls. A 132-foot drop. Flanked on either side by eroded pillars of volcanic rock. Two days later, they reached the upper falls of the Yellowstone River. Teetering over a 109-foot drop. The precipice of Upper Falls marks a dramatic geological shift in the Yellowstone riverbed. It's where hardened, water-resistant lava flows give way to softer rock. A boundary set by volcanic eruption over 450,000 years ago. Hayden's team was humbled by the spectacle in front of them. But waterfalls were not what they were seeking. They were looking for the source of the mighty Yellowstone River. And 6 miles upstream, they found what they were after. On July 28th, they arrived at Yellowstone Lake. At 7,732 feet above sea level, and covering 136 square miles, it is the largest body of water in Yellowstone. In late July, Hayden and his men set up camp by the lake. They could see the islands in the distance, but they didn't have a boat. When you're an explorer, your job is to explore. You don't have something you need, build it. You don't know how, you better figure it out pretty quick. And that's what they did. They used a fallen pine as the base and carved oars out of branches. Then they rigged up one of their blankets as a sail and named her Annie. They placed Annie in the lake and crossed her fingers that she'd hold. It's the true spirit of an explorer. Figuring things out on the fly. Forging ahead with no safety net. No guarantee of success.
When I was younger, I wanted so much to be on a lake by myself, going somewhere, that between the ages of 7 and 18, I built 3 different canoes. And they all looked horrible. They were all handmade. But I took the last one I built down some of the rivers that Lewis and Clark went down because it just spoke to me out loud. I was determined to be out there.
To experience the kind of thrill Hayden and his men must have felt, just get in a boat and go. What Hayden found as they sailed the Annie was an island they described as a jungle. Full of wild game. Want to know the best part about being an explorer? You get to name things after yourself. Jim Stevenson was the first one off the boat, so naturally they named it Stevenson's Island. Hayden raved about their discovery in a letter to the Smithsonian. With a seaworthy boat at his disposal, Hayden wanted to explore and map the entire lake. The team sailed the Annie to 6 other islands, naming each one after themselves or family members. After they finished mapping the lake, Hayden and his team pushed deeper into the strange land. They continued their mission of mapping a potential route for the railroad and collecting geological samples. Some of which gave the team a sense that even John Coulter was not the first to come here. Not by a long shot.
One of the geological samples that Hayden collected was an insanely sharp hunk of geological glass called obsidian. That's what these spear points are made from. I can touch it, right?
Yeah.
Obsidian was used by ancient peoples as weapons because it can be made to be sharper than any modern razor. This one was found in New Mexico. And this one was found in Utah. And this one was discovered in Ohio, 1,800 miles from here. You know what all these have in common? They all came from a single outcrop of obsidian that's right here in Yellowstone. Obsidian is formed when lava reaches the surface and cools rapidly. It usually breaks apart during this process, which is why it's typically found in small fragments. But Obsidian Cliff in northwest Yellowstone is a 200-foot tall outcrop of pure obsidian. It's a geological anomaly and the mother lode for hunter-gatherers in need of some new spears. Some of these spear points are 11,000 years old. Think about that. 11,000 years before Hayden was even born, indigenous Americans were using this land. I try to picture it, try to imagine what the first indigenous people must have thought when they arrived here thousands of years ago. Bison as far as the eye can see. Woolly mammoths. The earth rising, breathing. All the obsidian you could carry. Pretty cool. The woolly mammoths are gone. And roads and boardwalks have been built. But in so many ways, Yellowstone is very much the same place that it was when the first humans found it 11,000 years ago. That's because at some point in August of 1871, Hayden and the 31 other men that followed him started to realize their mission to exploit the region was the wrong path. The samples they were collecting would have a new purpose. Documentation of a one-of-a-kind place that needed to be preserved. They filled 45 large boxes with over 1,000 specimens of minerals, plants, and animal pelts. They shipped them off to the Smithsonian to be organized and cataloged. Hayden was starting to build a case to convince the powers that be. On August 28th, Hayden posted a field report announcing the completion of his survey. They'd finished their journey into Coulter's Hell.
the terrain and scientifically studied every inch of the upper Yellowstone. But Hayden knew his greatest work was still ahead of him. He had to convince Congress and even the President of the United States to do something that no one anywhere in the world had ever done before. Protect a huge piece of land. Preserve it for future generations. Don't let them mine. Don't let them build. Just let it be. The phrase, "a picture is worth 1,000 words," wasn't unleashed into the ether until the 1920s. But I think Hayden knew what it meant long before that.
He knew that all the words in the report that he was planning to present to Congress were just that, words. So as he made his pitch to preserve Yellowstone, he saturated members of Congress with the photographs that William Henry Jackson had taken. Watercolors that Thomas Moran had painted. Suddenly, Coulter's Hell wasn't just the work of one mountain man's imagination. It was all very real. And enough members of Congress and the Senate saw the beauty in this place to pass the Yellowstone Park bill. Record time.
It was signed into law by President Ulysses S. Grant on March 1st, 1872. And the planet's first national park was created. Today, about 4 million people visit Yellowstone each year. And in the 150 years since Hayden did what he did, 422 more parks have been created in the U.S., spanning 84 million acres of pristine land. Countries all over the world looked at what was done here and thought, hey, that's a pretty good idea. There are now 4,000 national parks worldwide. %15 of the Earth's land. And 10% of the waters are protected. The National Park Service has been deemed America's best idea. But really, it seems like the world's best idea. I think we'd all like to dream that we can leave the world a better place than we found it. This is the story of some people who did.